It just wasn't my day. It's been 1 week since you saw the last update on this, and we have something that looks like a truck now. This is our Class 1, but it's just a rough prototype at this point. This chassis is one that is very similar to like my Class 2, but been modified to be Class 1 appropriate. So not a huge departure from what I'm used to driving, but it's got some changes to fit the rules and work with what I've got going on here, which the first thing that may jump out at you is my steering servo, which you can see is mounted in the center of the truck here. You can see the linkage that goes up to the front to a bell crank system, and that is what I will be running. However, it will be a little bit different than this. Right now what I've got is the Reefs 900 Smart mounted here in the center, and I've just got a long link up there that was just a link that I had. I think it's actually a Yeti rear upper link. But the reason that it's not exactly what I planned for in the end is that all of the bell crank parts right now are just 3D printed, and that's just so I could mock it up and test that it actually functions properly and efficiently. But that means that, you know, the servo horns, or however you want to call them, pitman arms, bell crank arms, whatever you want, it's fully 3D printed. So that's just a mock-up at this point. The final pieces will be metal and will be supported in a way that is more solid than just a bunch of 3D printed parts. But beyond that, we've got the F10 portal axles in the truck. We've got a standard VFD transmission there in the center as well. And up in the front, I've also got the Reefs 300 comp spec, or the 300 IS comp spec winch. Now, I've played around with the design of the cross braces and things like that a little bit, just some trial and error, moving and mixing around, and I ended up moving the winch back and up just 4 or 5 millimeters in each direction to make sure that it clears all of the steering in every direction. This has got some 80 millimeter S8E shocks on there. Hard anodized body, tinitride shafts, machined pistons, the machined cap as well, machined adjustable collars, but you can see there is no springs on it. Right now I'm building the truck at full bump. So that everything's as low as it can possibly be, so we can check to make sure clearances are good and always. But of course, when we're running, we'll have it set up in a proper sprung suspension manner. But this way we just know that everything will clear at the worst case scenario. The front geometry is always the hardest for that. Upper link clearance, drag link, tie rod, steering, flex in all directions, and making sure that it clears all of the components. But luckily, we've got that nailed. This is looking really good, so I don't have to focus on this as much right now. I can just kind of use it as my base, modify as I need before I go to the final version. I did cut these rails out of ABS plastic, just super cheap. I had it around, fairly similar to the size of the carbon fiber that I will eventually go with, but it just allows me to, it's almost free to cut these out. I have the router here, throw the design in there, chew it out, see what I like. If I need to add something here or there, it's no big deal to just throw another piece in there, throw these away and go. It is not rigid though. If I grab it, you can see I can just wiggle the chassis. Now it doesn't wiggle as much. Like I could technically probably drive this. I don't know that I'd want to or that it would last, but I could drive it. Especially up front, the VFD is mounted to the front cross brace, so this front part is actually really rigid. But beside the point, I would never run an ABS chassis like this. Chassis flex, not something I'm after. I did grab a Fusion Pro setup. This is the 2300 kV, and this is what I'm gonna probably throw in here for now. Whether or not it's what will end up in here for sure in the end, I don't know yet. But for the sake of simplicity and trying to fit everything in this chassis, I was just like, I'm gonna throw one of these in there. It's the motor ESC. I don't have to worry about anything else. I can just wire it in and go. So for now, that's gonna get thrown in, just to keep things simple. This may end up being brushed like my systems were last year, but again, like I said, yet to be seen. A modification that I did today actually is, I'm running the brass portal covers on these F10s. Now the brass portal covers add a nice amount of non-rotating mass, so gives you a little bit of forward bias, weight down low, but doesn't strain your drivetrain, anything like that, makes everything nice and smooth. However, it does force you to run at least a 350 hub, and being that this is Class 1, I want to try to keep this thing as narrow as possible. So what I did is I designed up some soft jaws that properly hold those brass weights. That way I could mount them into the manual mill, and I milled some of that brass off, allowing me to go down to a 225 hub comfortably, sucking that wheel all the way up against that portal cover. This is going to give me just a 1/4 inch less width overall. Just helps keep things nice and tight. That'll get me close to that like 9 1/4 overall outside of tire to outside of tire front width. And I think that that's going to be okay. A little bit narrower than I was last year, and I'm good with that. Now, I haven't progressed any more on this as far as like finish sanding or prepping, getting any further. And the other body panels haven't progressed any further yet either. This is the fender mold for the passenger side, and this is the mold for the length of the driver's side. That is going to be our next big layup. This one I'm not too crazy concerned about. I think it'll go all right. This one, I'm not super worried either. I did pour the silicone for that one. Gives us a look at what that's gonna be like down the side. Of course, we've got the fenders and everything here already. We can kind of see about how everything's gonna start sitting, giving us that Porsche look. The carbon is always just like, it's a hill that I have to get myself over. I have to just get ready for it and dive in. I probably should do that tonight. Hopefully that's the case. But what I wanna do first is I wanna get that Fusion Pro installed. I've got my pinion and spur gear that I plan to put in here. And basically, once I do those two things, this truck could run, which feels good, because then I'm like, okay, we're to a point where we've got a nice base. I can start getting things mounted to here, and then I feel like things are going to actually, maybe I'll have a little bit of weight off my chest. I think I need more of the body panels done before I start feeling like I can relax in any way. But getting this step done was huge for me, because that was not having a truck to feel like you're working on yet. Definitely plays with your mind. We got some work to do tonight. Hand you off to the next update. Here we go, starting to form something that looks like a vehicle. We got the side panel on this one done, kind of. I'm gonna get to what I mean by kind of here in a little bit, but I did feel good about seeing this come out of the mold, and come out of the mold so easily. This mold was much simpler, even though it was longer, just super easy, and everything just came out. I did destroy one part of it, but the other two pieces of it could still make another one, which could be handy. But at this point, I just kind of mocked it up in here. It's setting there, but it is somewhat setting in the proper place, because I was anxious to see how things were going to start fitting. So what you see here on the chassis are a couple of little wings and mounts of sorts. I've got one here on the front that you see. And what that is that's just coming up. It's following the shape of the fender, and then this little surface here sits against the backside of the headlight. I've got a brace across the top of the shock towers that sets at the hood level and follows the contours of the hood. And then I've got one here in the back that follows the contour of the actual quarter panel to hold it in place as well. Now, that is not how these will be on the vehicle in the end. There will be something along the lines of that, but it will be a much more complete and a system that really attaches to the body panels. That's still yet to be designed, fabricated, manufactured, however it's going to happen, but that's the plan. Either way, this kind of locates it about where it should be, showing the rear being centered in that wheel well. Same with the front. And this is sitting at full bump. Like we mentioned before, there's no springs on it, so it's sitting all the way compressed. But it gives me an idea. It kind of shows me the width, things like that, making sure that I have proper tire coverage all around. That's a bonus. I got that Fusion installed. That's as simple as it gets because it's just all at once. So not much to say about that. Currently, I have the side body panel attached to the front fender. Just there's some overlap there. There's some larger surfaces, and I literally just have those surfaces shoe glued together. In the end, I'll plan to probably use like an automotive panel bond. That's a two-part epoxy that mixes itself inside of the applicator, and that's along the line. It'll be a fairly permanent solution. Right now, this is a non-permanent solution, and that is because, as I was alluding to before, I think I screwed up on this side panel. And I hate to say that. I feel like I should just roll with it and leave it as is because it looks good. I did a wet sand on it. It hasn't been polished out, but I feel like I screwed up, and I don't know why. I was in a rush. I wasn't thinking like I should. The part, like I said, it came out of the mold fine. I'll remove the hood here. It came out of the mold fine. The finish on the parts in general look great. I got it trimmed out, trimmed to shape and sanded, and the whole time it was eating at me because I made this part just way too thick. This part far exceeds the 060 requirement for a hard body, and in some areas is probably 4 to 6 millimeters thick, especially in the area here around over top of that wheel arch. In this back corner here, like this full thickness here is just solid carbon. Up here, it's about what it should be. It's a nice, just reasonably thin, thicker than a hard body normally would be. And I know what happened. I was in a rush when I started molding this. I was just like, I need to get a part done. I need to do this. I need to be making progress, and I just haven't been. So I mixed my resin, I loaded my mold, and I was putting the carbon in there, and I was like, I'm worried about things getting thin on this back corner, and I just kept putting carbon there, and I kept loading it and matting it down. And I just lost sight of how much I was putting in there. I knew I was heavier in areas, but I had no idea just exactly how heavy I had got. And heavy is my concern because this side panel just weighs so much more than it needs to. I feel like this could be actually bulletproof. Like actually bulletproof. It's so freaky. It's a raw, it feels like granite countertops. It's insane. I just feel like maybe what I should do is slow my roll and redo it. Make it the proper thickness. Don't go overboard, and do it again. Do it right. I don't know. I'm torn at this point. I don't think I'm going to dive right in and do it right now. I could, I should, who knows? But right now it's like a little bit of a step back because it's not bad in the sense that it wouldn't work. It absolutely would work. But it's bad in the sense that it's way heavier than I think it needs to be, and I feel like that's just I have such a hard time with this one. I still love the chopped carbon look, the forged carbon. I think it looks great, but it does take that discipline on my part to get things even. And for that reason, I do really like Matt's decision where he went with just straight carbon weave. I think that was a great decision on his part, and his parts are looking fantastic. So I think he made a good choice there. I'm not going to deviate from my plan at this point. I'm going to stay with the course, but I'm going to kick myself for a while longer. Oh, and then of course, one other little mess up on my part is right back here. And you can see that little blemish there, and that's actually just needs to be sanded off. That is black CA glue. And that's because while I was trimming this, I was trimming from the bottom side, and I didn't notice that my cutoff wheel went right through the top side of the fender. Another one that just made me super happy about this. However, I've already done a couple of fill and sands on this, and actually once it's filled and sand, it's almost completely unnoticeable. If you think these processes go smooth, it's only because I am a mediocre editor at best. One other large part of the project that I haven't touched on yet in the video series is the scale engine that I hope to put in the back of this vehicle. I have been taking and working on a twin turbo flat 6 model that's going to sit in the back there. It's going to be 3D printed. It's going to be a little outrageous, but it's going to be fun. I've already 3D printed one of the turbos. It's a very large turbo, but the flat 6 twin turbo engines in the back of the real 911s fill up a good portion of it, and this is going to be no exception. However, to get it to fit with the contour of how the body comes down and the size and everything like that, plus the rules of Class 1 that dictate where and how long my frame rails have to be, I'm gonna have to get a little bit creative. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna design the flat 6 engine to sit in the back, and I'm gonna have the frame rails work around the engine. It's gonna be designed hand in hand to be exactly what I need so that that engine sits back there in a proper place, but doesn't have to be downsized so much that it's not proper scale of what this thing is. As far as like the actual scale of this body with this era of 911, it's actually like just a little bit bigger than 8th scale. It's like 7 point something scale. So once you scale those engines up, they get pretty good size. But that's gonna be something that hopefully you'll see possibly even in Matt's video soon, because I hope to get him all the models so that he can 3D print them for us and do some of the detail work. And we all know that Matt is much better at those things than I am. So he's gonna do mine as well. I'm gonna get a test chassis like this cut and sent to Matt as well, so he can start working on his base so that we're working with the same things. There's still a lot of carbon left to do, and I hope by the next time that you see this, we have maybe most of it done. I think that the last part that I have to finish the design on is the cowl and windshield frame, which I have more concerns on, but we'll get to that. I haven't made any progress on Class 2 or Class 3 yet. This has been my sole focus. But if you have any suggestions on things that I should be thinking about to incorporate in this as we go, absolutely drop them below, because I need to try and figure those things out before we get to the end of this. It's gonna be here before we know it. It is already the middle of this month, and that means that we're like 2.5 months left. Somehow that happened overnight. I don't know. Stressful, but oh so exciting at the same time. With that, thanks as always for joining in. Road to the Rockies is gonna be a fun one. I'm looking forward to seeing this thing come to the end, I hope. Thanks as always for watching. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button. Subscribe if you're not already. Hit the notification bell so you see the videos as soon as they get uploaded. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one.